On November 14th, 1995, Bus 375 left Yuan Terminal just before midnight, heading for its final destination, Fragrant Hills, a park in Beijing's Haidian district. On board were the driver, a female conductor, and a few late-night passengers, including a young couple, a lone man, and an elderly woman. A few stops in, something unusual happened. The driver noticed figures standing alongside the road, outside of any official bus stop. Two men were propping up a third, who appeared unconscious. Despite the strange scene, the conductor reminded the driver that it was the last bus of the night, so he pulled over and let them board. The three men wore Qing dynasty robes. Their skin was pale, their expressions blank. No one spoke to them, and no one approached them. To calm the unease, the conductor joked that they were probably actors, maybe extras from a period drama who hadn't changed out of costume. The explanation was accepted, at least on the surface. The bus continued into the night. After a few more stops, only a few passengers remained: the young man, the elderly woman, and the three strangers at the back. And then the mood shifted. The old woman suddenly stood up and accused the young man of stealing her wallet. She insisted they get off the bus and go to the nearest police station. The driver, unsure but cooperative, stopped and let them off. As the bus pulled away, the young man turned to the woman and asked, "Why did you accuse me? I didn't do anything." She told him there was no police station, and she didn't think he was a thief. She said she had been watching the three men at the back of the bus, and when a cold breeze blew through the window, she saw their robes lift slightly. They had no feet. They weren't standing. They were floating. The next morning, Bus 375 failed to report back to the terminal. 2 days later, it was discovered submerged in the Mion Reservoir, nearly 100 kilometers away from its intended route. Inside were three bodies: the driver, the conductor, and one more unidentified man. That was the first of many strange details. The bus didn't have enough fuel to travel that far. Security footage from the reservoir gates showed no sign of it ever arriving. And despite only being missing for 2 days, the bodies were found in a state of severe decomposition, far worse than what would be expected in that time. In some versions of the story, the fuel tank was filled with blood. In others, the third body was never identified. Sometimes the legend ends with no bodies at all, the bus vanishing without a trace. Some researchers believe the story began online in the early 2000s. Others trace it back to a Chinese radio show in 1998. Either way, it remains one of the country's most enduring urban legends. Even today, versions of the story resurface, especially around Ghost Month, when it's said the boundary between the living and the dead becomes thin. The legend of the White Death doesn't have a clear origin. Some say it began in Scotland. Others claim it comes from Mexico, where it's known as La Muerta Blanca. But no matter the version, the core of the story is always the same. There was once a girl, someone deeply unhappy, who hated life so much that when she died by her own hand, her final wish was to erase every trace of her existence. Not just her body, but her memory, her name, her presence in the world. After the girl's death, her family died shortly after. According to the story, they were found with their bodies severely damaged, torn apart in ways that suggested something violent and deliberate. Then it spread further. People who had known her, or simply heard about her, began to die under similarly unexplained circumstances. That's when the legend began to take shape. People started reporting strange sightings. A figure standing outside their home, or watching from a distance, not moving, but always somehow closer the next time they looked. This is how the entity came to be known as the White Death. Descriptions vary, but she's usually portrayed as a young girl with something unnatural about her. Her eyes are sometimes said to be cold and black, and in some versions, gold and crying blood. She doesn't walk normally. People say she appears to move forward without actually moving her body. The main detail that makes the story unsettling is this. Once you've heard her tale, she begins to follow you. A version of the legend found on forums like Quotev and Creepypasta Wiki describes the meaning of each knock. She knocks once for your skin, which she'll use to patch her own. Twice for your hair, which she chews between her teeth. 3 times for your bones, which she turns into tools. 4 times for your heart, which she removes from your chest. 5 times for your teeth, which she keeps. 6 times for your eyes, taken one by one. 7 times for your soul. The story claims if you try to run, it doesn't help. She'll follow wherever you go, and there's one modern version of the legend that comes from a hospital in Mexico. A man was admitted for unrelated reasons, but during his stay, he began screaming uncontrollably. When staff tried to calm him, he told them he was being followed by a girl who wanted to get rid of anyone who knows about her. He claimed he first heard the story from a friend. Not long after, he began to feel watched. Then came the knocking at his door at night, though no one was ever there. Staff dismissed it as a psychiatric episode, but soon, other patients in nearby rooms reported similar things. A girl outside their window, footsteps in empty hallways, and the same persistent knocking. There's no official record of the event, but retellings of the story still circulate online. Now that you've heard her story, do you think you'll hear that knock? In September 1938, the neighborhood of Algiers, located just across the river from New Orleans, began reporting something strange. Witnesses described a man with unnatural features: horns, ears shaped like sunflowers, and large, bird-like eyes. They said he could fly, change form, and disappear at will. They called him the Devil-Man. For a few more weeks, panic gripped the area. There were dozens of sightings, police involvement, and eventually an arrest. But that didn't stop the reports. And to this day, no one's really sure what happened, or why so many people believe it was real. The earliest widely reported encounter came from a married couple returning home from a night out. They were driving late at night when a man on the roadside waved them down, asking for a ride. The wife said she didn't like the look of him, so they kept going. 10 miles later, they saw him again. Same man, same request. They ignored him again. Then, he appeared a 3rd time. This time, according to the couple, he transformed in front of their eyes into a horned, demonic-looking figure. The wife fainted. The husband panicked and drove. A few miles later, the figure returned one last time, now riding alongside their car on a brown horse. Eventually, they lost him. But the encounter left them shaken. The couple told neighbors, and the neighbors told police. More sightings began to come in, enough that the local department took them seriously. Witnesses described a man who could change shape, break into homes and bars, and insult passers-by before vanishing. She claimed he transformed into a baboon. Others said he flew through the air. Police reportedly fired their weapons at him more than once. One account claimed that their bullets were thrown back at them by what were described as hairy hands. The more the story spread, the more chaotic things became. One officer, Sergeant Holm, went as far as saying that anyone claiming to have seen the Devil-Man should be arrested just to bring the situation under control. Not long after, police detained a man named Clark Carlton. He was described as disheveled, wide-eyed, and speaking incoherently. He came from Arkansas and said he'd been sent to Louisiana by someone named King Zulu, not the Mardi Gras figure, but a so-called spiritual monarch and advisor to Neptune, the Roman god of the sea. Carlton also said that he wasn't the devil, but that he was greater than the devil. He described receiving his powers in 1937 when Neptune appeared to him as a fishhook while he was reading the Bible. He was told to walk forward until he met a two-headed man. When he did, and the figure vanished, he claimed that's when he knew he had been chosen. It was difficult to determine whether Carlton actually believed what he was saying, or if he was mentally ill. Regardless, police held him in custody. Despite the arrest, reports didn't stop. On September 13th, over 200 people called in sightings to the Algiers police. Witnesses said the Devil-Man was entering bars, intimidating bartenders into giving him drinks, and vanishing on command. One caller said he had seen the Devil-Man performing a dance at a popular club on South Rampart Street. Others said he lifted his hat to reveal horns growing from his scalp. Some bar owners even started claiming the Devil-Man was a regular, possibly as a marketing tactic. Crowds would gather, hoping to catch a glimpse of him. One patron even said, "If the Devil-Man takes me to hell, I want to be good and drunk." Whether sincere or not, the story was becoming profitable. On September 24th, someone shouted Devil-Man in the basement of Craignegor Public School. What followed was near chaos. Children ran screaming, teachers barricaded themselves in classrooms, and terrified parents rushed to the building. Religious figures in the area responded with mixed reactions. One nun warned the community not to engage with anyone calling themselves the devil. Another church leader said they should still be treated with kindness, be he devil or baboon. Then, a rumor began spreading that a baby had been born with horns. Witnesses said it had horns and all, and many took it as confirmation that the Devil-Man had left something behind. Back in custody, Carlton gave what was likely his most detailed and surreal statement yet. He claimed that although he was in jail, his spirit was still free, haunting the city. He said, "Yes, they got me in jail, but it's my spirit that is haunting the people. If I wanted to, I could get out of sight right now. I came from the hills of Arkansas on September 6, 1938. I walked under the stars, and Neptune guided me through the darkness of the night. I reached Port Allen, Louisiana, and from there I rode the ferry to Baton Rouge. Then I came to New Orleans, still under the guidance of Neptune and possibly one of his assistant stars. I stopped at the Page Hotel. I came to New Orleans as the sun came down in the skies. Tonight I'm going to divide myself with Neptune, and maybe when you come back, I will be able to tell you more. But please tell everyone that I'm not going to hurt anyone. My spirit is just passing around New Orleans and Algiers like a bird because I have been mistreated by the police." Eventually, the reports stopped. The panic faded, and Algiers went back to normal. At least on the surface. Clark Carlton's fate after his arrest isn't well documented. Some believe he was just a mentally ill man in the wrong place at the wrong time. Still, the timing of the sightings, and how they continued even after his arrest, raised questions that were never really answered. It's hard to know what was real and what wasn't. But for a few weeks in 1938, Algiers was convinced it was being haunted. Not by a ghost or a killer, but by something stranger. Something no one ever really understood. Magical Princess Minky Momo was a 1980s anime aimed at children, particularly young girls. It followed the adventures of a magical girl who travelled between the human world and a fantastical realm, helping people and spreading joy. The series was popular enough to generate a large line of merchandise, stationery, toys, cosmetics, and more, all branded with Momo's image. But in 1983, things started to unravel. The toy company Poppy, which helped fund the show, pulled its financial backing. Without the sponsorship, the creators were forced to end the series earlier than planned. One of the lead writers, Takashi Shudo, was reportedly upset about this, and made a bold decision for the series' final episode. In episode 46, Momo is struck The vehicle that hit her was carrying toys, an intentional detail referencing the sponsor that dropped the show. The episode shocked viewers. While the character would later be reincarnated and the show would go on to complete 63 episodes in total, the impact of that scene lingered. Many children who watched it were left confused or disturbed. And then something strange happened. On May 26th, 1983, the day that episode aired, Japan was hit by a major earthquake. It became known as the Sea of Japan earthquake. It triggered a tsunami that devastated the coastal regions. 104 people died, over 300 were injured. All 4 regions where the episode aired that day were affected. Initially, it was seen as an unfortunate coincidence, but over time, patterns began to emerge. In total, 5 earthquakes occurred around the airing of Minky Momo finales. One of the most devastating happened in 1995. The show had gone on to reruns, and a final episode aired again on January 15th. That same day, the Great Hanshin earthquake, also known as Kobe earthquake, struck Japan. Over 6,000 people were killed, 45,000 lost their homes. At this point, fans began talking about a curse. The theory claims that when Momo was killed off in episode 46, her soul was somehow freed from the show, and that her spirit, angry over being written off for commercial reasons, causes destruction whenever her death is broadcasted. Multiple earthquakes, multiple deaths, all coinciding with the fictional death of a magical girl character. It's worth noting that Takeshi Shudo, the writer behind Momo's final episode, would later go on to write for Pokemon. He's credited with creating many of the darker, more philosophical episodes of that franchise. He also died in 2010, reportedly after collapsing in a train station while working on a new story. Whether or not the curse is real, Minky Momo remains one of the most unusual and tragic cases in anime history. In the late 1800s, in the quiet farming town of Terrell, Texas, lived a woman named Clara Crane. She was a mother, a wife, and by all accounts, a quiet and reserved woman. Clara had married an older man named Leonard, and together they had a daughter, Marcella. But in 1893, their lives changed forever. Marcella died in a tragic accident on the farm. The details were unclear, but some said Leonard had been drinking at that time. Clara blamed him for everything. She grew distant, stopped speaking to people, and kept mostly to herself. 2 years passed. Then one evening, in 1895, Clara served Leonard a plate of caramels, his favourite candy. The next day, the house was unusually quiet. Clara hadn't been seen in town. She hadn't answered her door, and a neighbour, who had noticed her passing near the window the night before, thought something was wrong. When they knocked and got no answer, they went inside. Clara was there, shaken, confused, and barely coherent. The neighbour called the sheriff. When the authorities entered the home, they found Leonard Crane dead, and sitting right there on the table was the leftover caramels. The police later discovered they were laced with poison. Clara was arrested, but instead of standing trial, she was declared unfit and committed to North Texas Lunatic Asylum, known now as Terrell State Hospital. She stayed there for a few years. Then, in 1899, she was quietly released due to overcrowding. That's where the paper trail ends and the urban legend begins. Locals say that after Clara's release, children started disappearing, one by one. Some said they found candy on their windowsills, neatly wrapped, with handwritten notes saying, "Come play," signed by the Candy Lady. Some of the kids tried it, and soon they would vanish. Years later, a sheriff investigating the disappearances was found dead, forks jammed into his eyes, his pockets full of candy. People in Terrell have been telling the story of the Candy Lady for generations. Some versions change a few details, but they all come back to the same thing. Clara Crane's dark past. Some believe this story was made up by parents to teach their kids not to trust strangers. Whether it really happened or not, it's still one of the creepiest legends to come out of Terrell, Texas. I hope you liked these dark and obscure stories. First time hearing them? Or have you heard them before? Let me know in the comments. And if you've got creepy stories or strange cases you'd like me to cover next, feel free to send them my way. Till next time.